These are your 4-6A notes on the quadratic formula. This is the final method, probably the most preferred method of solving quadratics. So it's probably the longest, but the least amount of thinking involved. It's a formula, so I know that's why a lot of kids like to use it. So it's a formula that works for any quadratic equation. So it can work for rational solutions. Those are your nice whole numbers and fractions, positives and negatives. Irrational solutions, those are your square root of 3s and your plus or minus square root of 5s. And then imaginary solutions, that would be any solutions that have an I in it, so your negative square roots. I would like to say that completing the square also works for all three, but this is probably more preferred over completing the square. So as long as you have your formula set up in that fashion, in that order where it equals 0. So we're going back to that idea that it has to equal 0. The only time it didn't equal 0 is when we used the square root property or we completed the square. So if you have your equation in this fashion where it's set equal to 0, you have these numbers A, B, and C in your equation, okay? And you simply plug them into this formula, which is the opposite of b, or negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and the whole thing is over 2a. The plus or minus there is because of the square root. Remember, when we take the square root of something, we do the plus or the minus, and so that's where you could possibly get two solutions. I think you're pretty much all familiar with this from Algebra 1. I know it's the preferred choice whenever we have to use it in geometry. So again, we will apply it for a third time in Algebra 2. So even though these are t's, it works the same way as if they were x's. So I think it's important that you identify that your a value is a positive 1, your b value is a negative 10, and your c value is positive 24. Okay? If you go through all that work of the quadratic formula and you have a wrong sign, it's a lot of wasted time. So take the time to write down those values. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the time to write down the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Once you have the formula written down, you're looking at each letter. It's just a simple substitution. X equals, it says the opposite of b. So since b was negative and my 10 was negative, now it's a positive 10. Plus or minus the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 24, all over 2 times 1. If you don't show that step, you're not getting credit. It will be wrong on your test or your quiz. So the very first step, write down the A's, B's, and C's. Second step, write down the formula. Third is just plugging the numbers in without doing any calculations. A simple substitution step. This third step, we're allowed to do the 3 separate multiplications that are occurring. So we can write down 10 plus or minus the square root. We can multiply the negative 10 by itself, or square negative 10, which gives us 100. We can multiply this negative 4 times 1 times 24, which is a negative 96. And then we can do the 2 times 1 in the denominator, which is 2. So just to refresh, in that step, because they're separate from each other, we can do 3 different things all at once. But that's it. I want to see that progression. That helps me figure out your mistake and figure out where you're making mistakes so that you stop making mistakes. Okay, so it will be required. Following the order of operations, we can actually do the subtraction now. So x equals 10 plus or minus the square root of 4 all over 2. Notice I didn't take the square root of 4. I just did the subtraction to get 4. The next step would be to actually do that step. Take the square root of it if you can. In this case, it's perfect. So 10 plus or minus 2 all over 2. At that point, I have my answer, but it's kind of written together. So I'm going to take the time to write them as 2 separate answers. So it's 10 plus 2 divided by 2, which is really 12 divided by 2, or 6. There's one of your solutions. And then 10 minus 2 divided by 2, which is 8 divided by 2, or 4. So my two solutions are 4 and 6. Okay, I want to see all of that work. The work tells the story. So yes, you'll get credit for the right answer, but you'll get more credit for showing the right process in all of the process. You skip steps, you skip points. Okay, so this next one, a little bigger numbers. Okay, some people recognize that you could make the numbers you could divide both sides of this equation by 3. If you want to do that, I divide this side by 3 and this side by 3. That's helpful. It makes the numbers a little bit more manageable. And 0 divided by 3 is just 0. So it really didn't change anything. It just makes the numbers a little bit smaller. My A value here is a positive 1. My B value is a negative 6. And my C value is a positive 9. I'm ready to start. Write the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I know some of you guys think that I'm crazy to have you show that work, but if you do it right and you take the time to do it right the first time, it will save you time in the end from being frustrated and having it wrong and then having to redo it anyway. X equals, now we're going to substitute. Since my b value is negative 6, the opposite would be positive 6, plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9 all over 2 times 1. X equals, I can do 3 multiplications. 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 36 all over 2. So I squared the negative 6. I multiplied the negative 4 times the 1 times the 9. Notice I call that negative 4 and not subtraction. I just rope it in with the 4, and that way if there's a couple negatives, it'll turn into a positive. So try to keep that sign with the 4. It helps. X equals 6 plus or minus. When I subtract, I get the square root of 0 divided by 2. Well, the square root of 0 is just 0. So X is going to equal 6 plus or minus 0 divided by 2. Well, when you add or subtract 0, it stays 6, right? So that part's not even necessary. So my value is X is equal to 6 divided by 2, or in simplified form, 3. So I just gave you an idea or a problem where it's one solution. That means that the vertex was on the x-axis. Okay, one more example here. Okay, in this particular case, it's not equal to 0, so I need to make it equal to 0 first. If you don't do that, you're going to be using the wrong value for your c value here. So 5m squared plus 7m plus 3 equals 0. It has to equal 0. Now you have the right values of a's, b's, and c's. Your a value is 5, your b value is 7, and the c value is 3. If you didn't move it over, a common error is that people call the c value negative 3. So make sure that you move that c value over. Write down the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I know I said x. I really should have said m because of the variable, but it doesn't really matter. X equals, an opposite of b is negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3 all over 2 times 5. X equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 60. Okay, and when you subtract 60 from 49, I'm going to get a negative number in there. All over 10. Negative 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 11 all over 10. And the only thing that I can clean up here, 11 is not perfect. 11 doesn't have any perfects living inside it. The only thing I can factor out is the negative 1. So negative 7 plus or minus I, which is the negative 1 in that 11, making my square root of 11 positive all over 10. That is the easiest way to write your solutions. You can't give me a decimal equivalent. You could separate them, but why? You're already done. So there's two solutions, and those two solutions are just telling me that this parabola did not cross the x-axis at all. But not only did it not cross, I know exactly what the two imaginary solutions are. Okay? So take the time, be neat, one line per part of your formula. So because there's two parts to your formula, you should be committing this part of your formula to a line, this part to a line, writing your division sign on one of those lines of your paper. Okay? When you squeeze in Algebra 2 work, complicated mathematical work, that's when you make mistakes. So these formulas, these complicated problems are making you slow down and be neat and precise. Lesson summary, I need you to just identify the A's, B's, and C's of that equation. And then in the second part, I want you to solve using the quadratic formula. Good luck.